They burned them. They buried them. They declared them heresy, treason, and dangerous to the natural order. They sent armies to find them and soldiers to destroy them. And in doing so, the most powerful institutions in human history, empires, churches, governments, told us more about what they feared than anything they ever admitted openly. Because you do not burn a book unless you are afraid of what it contains. This is the story of 7 books that were erased from history, books that powerful people decided you were never meant to read, and what we know, or can piece together, about what was inside them. The first book, the Books of Enoch. The Book of Enoch is one of the most extraordinary texts ever discovered, and one of the most deliberately suppressed. Enoch was a figure mentioned briefly in the book of Genesis, described as a man who walked with God and was taken up to heaven without dying. What the Bible doesn't tell you is that, for centuries, there existed an entire body of writing attributed to Enoch, detailed, elaborate, and deeply disturbing to religious authorities. The books of Enoch describe the fallen angels in precise detail, their names, their crimes, and the forbidden knowledge they gave to humanity. They described astronomical systems of extraordinary sophistication. They contained visions of heaven and hell that were more detailed and more complex than anything in the canonical Bible. And they described a version of cosmic history that placed humanity at the center of a war between divine forces, a war that was still ongoing. For the earliest Jewish and Christian communities, the books of Enoch were scripture. They were quoted in the New Testament. The Epistle of Jude contains direct references to the Book of Enoch. The early church father Tertullian defended them as authentic. And then, at some point in the first few centuries of the Christian era, a decision was made. The books of Enoch were removed from the Bible. They were declared non-canonical, not genuine scripture. They were suppressed. And for over 1,000 years they were lost to the Western world entirely. The complete text survived only in Ethiopia, preserved by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which never accepted their removal from Scripture. When European scholars finally rediscovered them in the 18th century, what they found was a text so complex, so detailed, and so theologically provocative that the question of why it had been suppressed became immediately obvious. It described things that official religion had decided humanity was not meant to know. The second book, the Sibylline Books of Rome. For over 500 years, the Roman Republic and Empire were guided in moments of crisis by a collection of prophetic texts known as the Sibylline Books. According to Roman tradition, these books had been purchased from a mysterious prophetess, a Sibyl, by the last king of Rome, Tarquinius Superbus, in the 6th century BC. The original collection was said to have been 9 books. The Sibyl offered them all to Tarquinius at a high price. When he refused, she burned 3 and offered the remaining 6 at the same price. When he refused again, she burned 3 more. He paid the original price for the remaining 3. The Senate kept them in a stone vault beneath the Temple of Jupiter, guarded by special priests, and consulted them only in moments of the gravest national emergency. No private citizen was ever allowed to read them. Only the priests could access them, and only with Senate permission. What did they contain? Prophecies about Rome's future. Instructions for appeasing specific gods during specific crises, and, according to ancient references, information about the true nature of Roman power and its eventual end. In 83 BC, the original books were destroyed in a fire. The Senate immediately dispatched envoys across the ancient world to collect replacement prophecies. These replacement books served Rome for another 4 centuries. In 405 AD, the general Stilicho ordered them burned, declaring them incompatible with Christianity. Everything they contained, every prophecy, every instruction, every piece of knowledge the Roman Senate had used to guide an empire for 5 centuries, was gone in an afternoon. The third book, The Lost Mayan Codices. Before the Spanish arrived in the Americas, the Maya had one of the most sophisticated written traditions in the ancient world. Their codices, books made from beaten bark paper, folded accordion style, covered in elaborate illustrations and hieroglyphic text, contained centuries of accumulated knowledge. Astronomical observations of extraordinary precision. Mathematical systems that independently arrived at the concept of zero. Medical knowledge. Historical records stretching back thousands of years. Religious texts. Agricultural calendars accurate to a fraction of a day. And most remarkably, records of Mayan history and mythology in the Mayans' own words. In 1562, a Spanish Franciscan friar named Diego de Landa gathered the Mayan books of the Yucatan and burned them in a public ceremony in the town of Mani. He later wrote about this event himself, describing burning what he estimated to be 27 codices along with 5,000 idols and countless other objects. His justification: they contained nothing but superstition and the devil's lies. The Mayan people who witnessed the destruction wept and cried out with great grief. Of the hundreds, possibly thousands, of Mayan books that existed before the Spanish conquest, exactly 4 survived. 4. What was in the books that burned? We will never fully know. What the 4 survivors tell us is that the Mayan understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and time was so advanced that it has taken modern scientists decades to fully appreciate it. The books that burned almost certainly contained far more. The 4th book, The Secret Teachings of Aristotle. Aristotle wrote prolifically. By ancient accounts, he produced between 400 and 500 separate works on subjects ranging from physics to poetry, from politics to the nature of the soul. Of those 400 to 500 works, we have approximately 47. The rest are gone. And here is what makes this genuinely disturbing. The works we have are not the works Aristotle intended for public circulation. The works that survive are his lecture notes, his working papers. The works he actually published, polished, complete, intended for wide readership, are almost entirely lost. Ancient writers who had access to them describe them as completely different in tone and argument from the dry technical texts we know. They describe dialogues of extraordinary beauty, works on comedy that apparently developed a complete theory of humor and its relationship to truth, works on philosophy, on the nature of the divine, on the relationship between human reason and cosmic order. Gone. What we know is that the Bible we have is not the only book there was. It is the book that survived, and everything Aristotle chose to share with the world is lost. What we have is only what he used in his classroom. The 5th book, The Gospel of Thomas and the Nag Hammadi Library. In December 1945, an Egyptian farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Saman was digging near the cliffs of Jabal al-Tarif, close to the town of Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt. His mattock struck a red earthenware jar about a meter high. He initially hesitated to break it open, fearing it might contain a spirit. Then, hoping it might contain gold, he smashed it. Inside were 13 leather-bound codices wrapped in golden-colored leather. They had been buried there sometime around 400 A.D., hidden almost certainly to preserve them from destruction. They turned out to contain 52 texts, early Christian writings, Gnostic Gospels, philosophical treatises that had been excluded from the Bible and declared heretical by the early church. Among them was the Gospel of Thomas, a collection of 114 sayings attributed directly to Jesus, with no narrative, no miracles, no crucifixion story, just teachings. Many of them have no parallel in the canonical Gospels. Many of them are more complex, more philosophically demanding, more spiritually challenging than anything in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. The early church had access to these texts. They had read them, and they had decided that these were not the words the people needed to hear. For 1,500 years they lay buried in a jar in an Egyptian cliff, waiting. The sixth book, the book of the wars of the Lord. The book of Numbers, in the Hebrew Bible, contains a reference so strange that scholars have puzzled over it for centuries. In chapter 21, describing the journey of the Israelites through the wilderness, the text suddenly refers to another book. It says it is written in the book of the wars of the Lord, and then quotes from it. The book of the wars of the Lord. An entire book, apparently well known enough to be cited as a reference, apparently authoritative enough to be used as a source, that has completely disappeared. Not a single fragment of it has ever been found. We know it existed because the Bible references it. We know it was considered authoritative. We know it contained accounts of battles and journeys, and beyond that, nothing. It joins a list of books directly referenced in the Hebrew Bible that no longer exist. The Book of Jasher, the Annals of the Kings of Israel, the Annals of the Kings of Judah, the Acts of Solomon. Entire bodies of text considered important enough to be cited as sources by the authors of the Bible that have completely vanished. The seventh book, the Great Encyclopedia of China. In the early 15th century, the Yongle Emperor of China commissioned the most ambitious intellectual project in the history of the ancient world. He ordered the compilation of all knowledge, every book, every text, every document in existence in China, into a single encyclopedic work. 2,000 scholars worked for 5 years to produce it. The result was the Yongle Dadian, a collection of over 22,000 chapters in over 11,000 volumes. It covered history, philosophy, science, medicine, astronomy, agriculture, art, military strategy, and virtually every other field of human knowledge. It was the largest encyclopedia ever compiled in human history, 6 times larger than the encyclopédie that the French Enlightenment would produce 300 years later. Only 3 complete manuscript copies were ever made. The original disappeared sometime in the 15th or 16th century. Nobody knows what happened to it. The second copy was housed in Beijing and was systematically destroyed over centuries, through fires, through rebellions, through the looting of foreign armies. Today, of over 11,000 volumes, approximately 400 survive. 400 volumes out of 11,000, the greatest collection of human knowledge ever assembled, gone. Here is what these 7 books have in common. They were not lost by accident. They were not destroyed by careless neglect. They were removed, deliberately, systematically, by people who understood exactly what they were doing and why. Empires burned prophecies that threatened their power. Churches buried gospels that complicated their theology. Conquerors destroyed the written heritage of entire civilizations to make those civilizations easier to control. Knowledge is not neutral. It never has been. The books that survive are the books that powerful people decided should survive. The books that burned are the books that powerful people decided were too dangerous to allow. Every library, every archive, every database you have ever used is a filtered version of reality, shaped by decisions made centuries ago by people you have never heard of, about information you were never meant to have. The question is not what was in the books that burned. The question is what we are missing from our understanding of the world because of what was in those books, and whether somewhere out there in an unexcavated cave, an unopened vault, or an uncatalogued archive, some of it is still waiting to be found. If this made you think, subscribe, because what they hid from history, we are bringing it back. One truth at a time.